doing that, I was face to face with it. It was holding me by my throat, and it felt like it was sucking something out of me.
I probably should have been more scared than I was when I witnessed the exorcism.
I turned and looked on my right side. When I did, there's a beam on the side of the tree, a large beam. It's looking at me and I'm looking at it.
After I hit the lock button and looked back up, I saw red eyes staring back at me.
That they're going to show multiple gods all over the earth, be able to speak in people's languages, and at that point, it kind of converge into this one entity, which will be revealed as extraterrestrial. You'll realize that aliens are the gods of old, and at that point, it'll wipe religion out of the context of humanity.
No, it couldn't have been a person, I know that. I know that people can't run through the woods like that.
So this thing comes into view, and I see it. It's 50 yards away from me. It's walking on two legs. It's huge. This is a big, hairy-looking being.
Welcome. I'm your host, and this is Uncomfortable. Welcome back to the show, my friends. I am your host, Eric Szilagyi. If you've had an uncomfortable experience and you'd like to have it shared here on the show, please get a hold of me at contact.uncomfortable@gmail.com. The world wants to hear your story. They want to hear your experience. So reach out to me and let's get yours on the next episode of Uncomfortable. If you haven't yet, make sure to join us on Facebook and Instagram, both at Uncomfortable Podcast 65. And when you do, please make sure to leave us a 5-star rating and review. That alone is the one most important thing that you can do as a listener to help get this show out into the algorithm and out in front of more people. With more people listening, that means more great stories coming your way. Uncomfortable Linktree is up and operational. That's the single best place that you can find everything Uncomfortable all in one spot. All of my Uncomfortable episodes, links to the YouTube, links to the Penford Media documentary series that I'm in, and every other podcast that I've had the pleasure of being a guest on. That's Linktree/Uncomfortable1, and Uncomfortable is spelled like the logo looks with the lowercase u and the uppercase N. That also is probably the easiest way to find your Eventbrite link for tickets to Bigfoot and Brews and Spirits 2. Don't forget to check out the combo ticket for the September 14th day of event and the VIP dinner the night before. The combo ticket is a discounted price from the regular tickets, and it still includes your dinner and one drink. Make sure you go to check out our sponsor at eufyofficial.com/videolock to see what all the fuss is about. Links to our Patreon, YouTube, and Bigfoot and Brews and Spirits 2, and all things Uncomfortable will be found in the link tree. That will be listed in the show notes for you. As far as Bigfoot and Brews is concerned, we are looking to fill our Makers Market that will be running in conjunction with the event. So if you're interested in a vendor opportunity, please make sure you get a hold of us at contactuncomfortable@gmail.com. There will be a linked video in the show notes to tell you a little bit more about that opportunity. Also, we are looking for sponsors for Bigfoot and Brews and Spirits 2. There is a good deal of cost to put in on these types of events, and if you would like to help the event financially, we would very much like to hear from you. Again, reach out to me at contact.uncomfortable@gmail.com for more information. Tonight's guests are Amanda and Sean, the two halves that make up the Haunted and the Strange podcast. They have assured me that there is no lack of high strangeness in the experiences they have had. So if you're ready, let's get into it. If you would, please welcome Haunted and the Strange to the show. Sean, Amanda, welcome to Uncomfortable, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, guys. Glad to have you here with us.
Thank you for having us.
I think we probably ought to state here that this is a international collaboration today. We have Amanda
Worldwide.
from Alberta, Canada, and Sean from Northwest UK. And I am smack dab in the middle of the Midwest of the U.S. So it's a pleasure to have you guys here.
Glad to be here.
Do me a favor. One of you guys tell us about your podcast and what led you to starting it.
Absolutely. So our podcast is, as mentioned, The Haunted and the Strange. We have a weekly drop every Tuesday. We outline anything that's weird. We do cryptids, hauntings, high strangeness, mysterious encounters, all that fun stuff. We actually met not in person. We met on Instagram.
Yep.
I came across Sean's page and we just got to talking. We're both into this weird stuff. So next thing we know, we started a podcast in January and we've just been going hard ever since.
Yep. Took some convincing on my behalf, but here we are.
Took you to convince her or her to convince you?
For Amanda to convince me. I'm not I wasn't a talker. I'm a sound engineer by trade. So okay. I said, I can produce it, no problem. But Amanda was persuasive, and here we are. I'm talking.
I didn't really give him a choice.
Funny how women can kind of dictate what we do in life, isn't it?
I mean, to be honest, it didn't take that much convincing, to be quite honest. But
no, it took me like 5 minutes. Back. He's lying.
Yeah.
So you guys met on Instagram, in the sense of following the weird stuff, or?
Yeah, we both kind of ran our separate pages, didn't we? Mine was Beyond the Norm, where I do kind of local hauntings, cryptids, lore, legends, and you were the same. And we just kind of came across each other and, found out we're both into the same things. And here we are. The rest is history.
And you say you started back in January?
Yeah, well, we started working on it in November? We started working on it, but we launched in January.
Yeah.
And how far are you along? How many episodes? Excuse me.
Our 20th episode comes out on Tuesday. 20th comes out on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, very so good. May 7th.
Very good. I mean, you guys are in the same niche as I, as far as the topic is to you concerned.
Yeah.
There's been times where I've thought it would be easier to have a co-host where you wouldn't always have to have a guest to complete that show. I don't know that I could do that though, because I used to do a podcast, just a small local one with a good buddy of mine. And, we would get caught up in our own conversation, and before we knew it, our hour was up, and, I don't know that we necessarily accomplished what we wanted to accomplish. So I don't know that I could do that, but it's often been a thought in the back of my head. Not that I'm looking for a co-host, but it would be an easier thing. We could pick a topic and then we could discuss it. We didn't have to worry about having a guest, but
that's how we operate, isn't it?
It can be a daunting task to keep drumming up people that are willing to come on. And I mean, I kind of pride myself. I've had some big names on the show, but as far as experiencers go, by and large, not all, but by and large, I've been able to find people that have not been on a dozen other podcasts telling the same story.
Yeah.
Right.
When I'm not throwing any shade at those people, but when you've been on two handfuls of podcasts telling the same story, it almost comes off as you're trying to sell something.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a book that goes in conjunction with it, or,
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
My hackles go up a little bit with those. So, so tell me, from each of you, give me one experience that led you down the path to wanting to eventually talk about this kind of stuff with other people and yourselves? Amanda, you go first.
Okay. Okay, so I've had something paranormal happen to me, but I wouldn't say that it was what really led me down this path. I've always been an avid reader, and I remember I was under the age of 10 because I was living in our first house, and my mom used to buy these. They were hardcover Reader's Digest. So Reader's Digest is like, I don't. Do you know what it is? It's a
I do.
small little
Yeah.
book. It's
Yep.
in Canada. They have like your little stories that are in it. And she had these hardcovers, and inside one of these there was a bunch of like weird stories in it, and I stumbled across the story of the Flatwoods Monster. And ever since reading that, I think honestly that is what has led me to where I am now. That is what it scared
Really?
me. It scared me really bad, and I was so fascinated by it, and I think that is truly the start of it all for me.
Very interesting. What about you,
Yeah.
Sean?
Yeah, I don't think, same with Amanda, I've not had anything from a young age that kind of led me down the path. Mine was more influence. So for me, and Amanda knows this, and I probably bang on about it all the time in our podcast, but it was The X-Files, and watching it originally in 1993 with my dad.
Yeah.
My dad was a fan. My dad, I wouldn't say he's a massive believer in paranormal, but he certainly doesn't turn a blind eye to it. So that was kind of my introduction to the paranormal field. And even though The X-Files is fictional, a lot of the time it is based on previous stories or lore and legend and stuff. So
Correct. Yeah.
that was kind of my introduction to it. So
It's funny that you bring up the X-Files because it is it's one of my go-to favorites. I
yes,
still go back and still watch it.
I would quite happily just watch it over and over again.
But
after a couple of months, if I'm bored, I go back to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, earlier today, I found a YouTube video of some gentleman. I imagine he's somebody. He looked like he had pretty good production, but I didn't recognize him at all. And he was doing a short 18-minute video on the old 1973 TV series called Kolchak, the Night Stalker.
Yeah.
And they only did one season of it. There were supposed to be 26 episodes, but they only completed 20. We have a local antenna channel here that every Saturday night at midnight, they play an episode. So, I always stay up and I watch it. And it's for its time, it was a really, really good, scary monster of the week with a reoccurring character. What I didn't realize is that Chris Carter, who developed the X-Files for Fox, used that show, Kolchak the Night Stalker, as the what's the word I'm looking for? It inspired him to create the X-Files.
I've heard that one before. Yeah.
And then
I've never heard of this show.
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, you have to understand that it's 1973, so the special effects are nothing like what you would want or expect today. Have you ever seen the movie Christmas Story?
Mm-hmm.
With the family, with the two little kids, and
no.
So the dad who played in Christmas Story. He's Carl Kolchak. So he's a newspaper writer. Supposedly takes place in Chicago, and every week he has some kind of weird experience with, one's a vampire, one's a mummy, one's a werewolf, there's a shapeshifter, and it was just a different monster every week. And it was really a great show. It really is. So.
I'll have to check it out. Check it out properly.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. And it's a shame because, like I said, it was supposed to be 26 episodes. They only ended up making 20. But thankfully, this channel here locally, they play it every Saturday night. So when I have a hankering for it, I can see
I
it.
love that.
Keeping the flame alive.
Yeah.
It's one of those comfort shows that you can get into bed, pull the covers up, and drift off to sleep before it's over. That's not an indication that they're not good. It's just
Yeah, I'll have to check this out.
yeah, it's well worth your time if you don't mind the obvious time issue. Which Stranger Things has done a fantastic job of recreating the 1980s.
Yes.
I don't mind that at all. So to me, to go back and watch something that was it's very dated in its clothing and the cars that you see and stuff like that. But to me, I guess that's part of the.
It's kind of becoming cool again, though, isn't it? Going back to the 80s style, retro.
Yes,
they say,
absolutely.
Retro.
This would be, I guess, considered retro ancient at this point.
The OG retro.
All right, guys. So, tell me real quick about your listener base. How do you reach them? Are you guys really active on the socials, or?
That is certainly your department, isn't it? I produce. You share.
Right. Well, we're on Instagram. We also are on TikTok, although I will say it's a little too much for me. TikTok, I don't think I will ever really be part of that world. I don't know if it's
you may not have a choice
here
soon.
I know. Well, I guess apparently they might be shutting down, so maybe I don't have to worry about it. I don't know. So we are over on Instagram. I have noticed just looking at where we're at and like where people are listening from. I think a lot of it has just become word of mouth. Like people, and then they'll stumble upon us. I think it might be our name. They're like, oh. And then it just kind of grows from there. So yeah, we're on Instagram. That's it so far.
But you're available on all the other formats as far as audio podcasts,
Absolutely.
Spotify, Apple, all the other ones.
Yeah.
You guys do anything?
We're not on YouTube, but not yet. Maybe we might have something coming down the pipe there. It's definitely on our to-do list. We're just not quite there yet.
Very good. Very good. Well, let's get into some of your experiences. Who wants to go first?
John, you go first. I like yours.
Yeah, me. I'll go on them. Well, I've actually got two. The first one was way back in, well, I say way back, but back in 2007, I used to be operational support for the prison service. So I worked at Lancaster Castle, which is about 5 miles away from where I live now. At the time, I lived in Lancaster, and I grew up in Lancaster, so it's always been really close. But yeah, at the time, I was operational support, and this one major incident, I was working the night shift. Within the prison service, basically, as a bit of a background, it's skeleton staff at nights. So all the prisoners are locked away, and then you have certain officers that are patrolling, I suppose you'd say, certain areas of the castle. So at any given point, there's only really one person in a particular area. And being a prison, all the gates are locked. Nobody can get in, nobody can get out. You're the only person with a key. So this one particular night, I'm not sure if you've ever seen a picture of Lancaster Castle, or
I know the name, and I don't know why I know the name.
Yeah, it is quite a popular, famous castle in Lancaster, in the UK. But if you ever look at a picture, it's got a big gatekeep called the John O'Gaunt Gatekeep, and it's a big, imposing structure. When you're inside, when the outer doors are locked, and then when it was a prison, you had another gate on the inside, and that was where vehicles could come and go. So it's always secure. Prisoners can't get in. People can't get in. Prisoners can't get out. So this one particular night, I was on the gatekeep. I'm the only person within this particular area, within that gatekeep. All the gates are locked. At the time, unfortunately, I smoked. So I went into the gatekeep, which had open air, to have a cigarette. And just out of the corner of my eye, basically in the gatekeep, they have like cutouts where guards used to be able to stand, but stand within the wall so that old carriages could go through and obviously not trample or run over the guards and stuff. So I walked down the steps, and bear in mind, I'm the only person in the gatekeep. I'm the only person that's got the key to the gatekeep. Out the corner of my eye, I could just see what I thought was a guard standing in old traditional, red and blue and white uniform, stood in that little kind of cutout. Now, at the time, I kind of panicked. I may have said a few swear words because I wasn't expecting it, but yeah, so out of the corner of my eye, could see him, turned my head back, nobody there, absolutely nobody. So at the time, my heart was pounding, my mouth had gone dry. I thought, Christ, I've done something wrong, I've let somebody in, but then I was like, nope, all the gates are still locked. I'm the only person with the key. So, yes, that was my story.
So your initial shock at seeing this guy was because you were under the impression that somehow somebody got in. It wasn't immediately obvious to you that this was a apparition, correct?
Yes, correct. At the time, but then when I turned back and it was gone, that's when I started thinking, well, where's he gone? If I had accidentally let somebody in, which is impossible because I'm the only one that's got the key, and they kind of lock automatically behind you anyway. But then when I turned back, the person's gone or the apparition's gone. Yeah. Hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Definitely.
So the uniform that you described, was that telling in any way as far as the era that this gentleman would have been from?
Yes. Yeah, kind of. And that was the other shocking thing about it, is our uniform at the time was black. White shirts, black ties, black epaulettes, black coats, black trousers. Whereas this apparition, we'll say, was wearing red, white and blue, which I believe is the old kind of military uniform from possibly the 16th, 17th century.
Really?
So,
wow.
But yeah, you've got to bear in mind as well that the original part of the castle is 983 AD. It was built, the Norman Keep. So there's over 1,000 years worth of history there. So, and there's a lot of additions that were built onto the castle. So could be anybody from that period.
I guess I didn't realize when you described his uniform, I was assuming that you were describing a uniform of somebody that would have previously been a guard like yourself. But if you're saying those colors were the 15th or 16th century, obviously that was in prison at the time.
It's been a prison for a long, long time. I don't know exactly how long it's been a prison. Yeah. In modern times, it was HMP prisons. In the past, it was what was called debtors' prisons. So if you were in any sort of debt to the government or to officials, to pay your debt off, you'd go and spend some time in a debtors' prison. And that goes back hundreds of years, that kind of confinement. So
you're not in with the serial killers and rapists and...
Well, not Lancaster Castle is what we would call a Category C. So it's basically a Category A is the worst of the worst. Then it goes down in categories. So we had kind of thieves, drug abusers, things like that. So they weren't particularly violent when I worked there. I do know in the 1980s, some of the IRA convicts were held there for trial. So they were probably about as violent as you would get.
Yeah.
In modern times, anyway. Yeah. Not entirely sure about a couple of 100 years ago. Maybe they were more violent back then, but certainly not in modern times.
Did you ever dig back and try to find like a representation of the uniform that you saw?
I kind of had a look back, and in certain parts of the prison, there are kind of, I wouldn't say exhibitions, but kind of information plaques because of how historic the building was. Mm-hmm. Even though the public couldn't go and see it, it was more for the staff's benefit. So they would have a few plaques dotted about the prison saying, these are the type of people that might have been here, or, small statues of people that once spent time in the prison. So there was a little bit of information at the time. And I mean, back in 2007, we didn't have smartphones or anything. So it wasn't like a quick and easy have a look. Plus, we weren't allowed mobile phones in the prison. So at that moment in time, I couldn't go, oh, what was this? Let's have a look.
Yeah.
So, and there was no internet in the prison either. Just in case. Security. But,
right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I actually, on the topic of prisons, I've got a crew that we are going to, it's about 90 minutes southwest of here, just outside of Chicago. There is an old jail that actually housed John Dillinger for a couple of weeks while he was being processed into other prison. Yeah. Johnny Depp did a movie about Dillinger, and a part of that movie was filmed in that actual jail. They still have the Hollywood set that was built for the filming there at the jail. But the rest of the jail remains intact and like it has been for a lot of years. And it's been featured on Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, just about any paranormal show that has been on TV. Yeah. And I went there for a fundraiser last summer. Might have been July or August. And it was funny because I was sitting out in this weird little courtyard, which I assume would have been the area that they let prisoners out because it was very narrow but long. And they had a band out there, and we sat out there, and it was a donation to the prison for upkeep. And somebody, I don't know who, had gotten information to the woman that was running the event, and she came up to me after the band was done playing, and she goes, are you the guy with the paranormal podcast? And I said, yeah, I am. And she's like, would you like to take a walk through the jail? And I was like, well, yeah, absolutely. It turned into a 90-minute tour. She got two people that were regular parts of a ghost team that goes in there, and man, they treated us like gold, and they took us through there. Yeah. I got really nauseous in one area. They were actually cells that had been dismantled, and then they were being used for storage. And we got into this one place, and in October they turned it into a haunted house for some time. And I can remember being in this storage room that had a bunch of just Halloween stuff, decorations, and man, I got really, really nauseous, and I was like, I gotta get out of this room. And there were no doors on it. It wasn't like I was feeling claustrophobic or anything like that, but I just got this nauseous wave came over me. And that was like right off the bat. That was like one of the first places we went into. And as soon as we stepped out of it, it cleared and I was fine.
Yeah.
A lot of creepy areas in that place. A lot of shadow play. So,
yeah,
it's like, if a car's going down the road and the lights are reflecting off the windows up on the second floor and they're hitting the steel cross members that are holding the ceiling up, it's like, if you keep thinking you see stuff darting around, and in actuality, it's probably not. But we got into this one area, and it was 3 small cells, and it was just this kind of like this tiny little block on its own. And I sat down on the edge of a metal table that was in the hall, and I had some really bad back issues at the time. So I reached my hand back behind me and I put my hand on one of the bars from the cell, and I was leaning back and I was just kind of trying to stretch my back out. And I felt something lightly go across the back of my hand. And I pulled my hand back because I'm thinking it was either a spider web dangling there or actually a spider. I'm not a big fan.
No, me neither.
And the guy was talking, the woman was talking, and this was the female detention area, which is why there were only a couple of cells, because typically they didn't have that many females in there. And they were talking about how a lot of males that come through that area will report having their the front of their trousers tugged on, like in the crotch area. And I was like, damn. Not sure I want that. Maybe. Probably not.
That kind of tour.
But then I stopped thinking about the thing across the back of my hand, and again I put my hand back, grabbed a hold of the bar, and I was kind of stretching, hoping to get my back to crack. The second time I did it, I felt a distinctive finger run across the back of my hand, and I jumped on that one. I pulled my hand back, and he goes, "You all right?" And I'm like, "Yep, I'm good." And he's like, "Do you feel something?" I'm like, "Yep." And he's like, "What happened?" And I told him. We probably had maybe a half hour left. We continued with the tour. Never felt anything on my hand. It was just felt like something, literally felt like somebody took their finger and ran it across the back of the hand.
Yeah.
Finished the tour, got out of there. It was probably around 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. Everything in that town was closing up. I was starving. I hadn't ate since before we had gotten there for the fundraiser. And I was walking down the street, and there was this like little diner that did like fancy mac and cheese dishes. And they were putting the chairs up on the tables, and I leaned my head in the door, and I'm like, "Man, I don't care what you got," but I said, "I'm starving. Is there any way I can get some food?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, don't worry about it. Come on in." So I sat down at the table, and I was waiting for my food to come, and I just was sitting like this, and I had my hands on the table, and I noticed on the back of that hand, I had scratches going across in the same direction that I felt the finger go across my the back of my hand. So I was like, "Holy fuck, are you kidding me?" So I grabbed my phone, I took a couple of pictures of it, and sure enough, it's there. But by the time I got back home, which was, like I said, probably close to a 90-minute drive, went in the bathroom, getting ready for bed, looked down at my hand, nothing. Not a little drip of blood from a scratch, no welt, no nothing. It was completely gone. And I was like, that was odd. So
sounds like she was just trying to warm you up.
Maybe she thought I was into the rough stuff. thought I wanted to be scratched. But I've got a crew that's going back to that jail on the 25th of this month, and we're going to do a proper,
that's exciting.
Proper investigation throughout the night. So
I can't wait. I'm excited to hear about this one. That'll be good.
Yeah. We're hoping to film it as well. So
Cool.
if all that goes well, we may end up with an hour, maybe an hour plus video to go along with it. But we're not going in. We're not going in with the same pretense as every other paranormal TV show.
Yeah.
I actually think that we're going to leave out the night vision cameras.
Yeah.
I think that's I think that's gotten to the point where it's become a cheap way to kind of put people in that mood.
Yeah.
So
people have already got a pretense of what they want to see.
Yeah. So I think
not what they actually
we're going to go in there with K2 meters. We've got Spirit Box. One of my guests that I've had on the show a couple of times, the Archbishop Christina Rake. She is going to accompany us on this.
Wow.
And she has been doing paranormal investigations for the better part of 30 years. So that'll be a lot of fun to have her along with us. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's going to be awesome.
Looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
Amanda, what have you had going on?
Well, you know what I actually want to talk about, because we're talking about paranormal investigations. So I'm going to dig into the one that I've done. I've only ever done one. There is, in the city that I live in, I live in Edmonton. It's a very big city. And there is what they call Fort Edmonton Park. And it is based out of an old fort. It's right off the river, so there was a lot of trade and stuff that happened there. And then as they grew this park, they brought in homes from Edmonton and around the city or around the area. Some of them are very haunted. So I went to do paranormal investigation at the park after hours. And we went into 3 different buildings. The first one that we went into was the top half of this home was the living quarters, and then the bottom they sold like tacked, so like horse saddles, stuff like that. So what we done, it was a group of us. We sat in a circle. And we went quiet. We had some recorders going. We had K2 meters, all that fun stuff. And we just kind of got the feeling of the home. And I remember walking in, because you would walk in through the back door, and the guide had told us when we walk in, and I can't remember the woman that was haunting this home, but when you were walking in, you were to say, "Hello, Mrs. So-and-so," because apparently at one point they had a group in, and there was a medium, and the medium had said, "She doesn't mind you coming in, but you're coming in through her entrance, her own private space. So you need to introduce yourselves." So anyways, we walked in, got a feeling of this place, and we were doing the Estes method. So I actually went upstairs and I sat in the dark. Everybody else was in the lower floor. With, I had the headphones on, and, it's when you know what it is, right? When you have it's like a radio frequency, I think. Yeah, it's like a radio frequency. White noise. And the radios are like jumping from station to station, basically. And you pick up on words. I didn't really get a bunch from it, but there was like "get out," "knows," like whoever it was, she didn't want us in the house. It was really, really creepy too, because I'm up there by myself. It's dark. I have like my back against the door. Like it was a little creepy. So that was really cool. And then after that, we went down the road to there was a little bit of a bake shop. And then once again, they had like the back parlor, and then the living quarters were upstairs. So we started that off with, I had a EMF reader, walked into the house. They had just changed the batteries before we went into this first place, and the batteries died. Okay. All right. So that's fine. I get new batteries. So we kind of just explore a little bit. At one point, I was like looking upstairs. I didn't see anything, but I heard what almost sounded like water dripping and hitting like a concrete floor. And it was just the weirdest thing to hear because the whole house was wood. I don't know. It was just really weird. And then at one point, we're standing in what would have been the kitchen because there was a cook stove and all that stuff. And I heard footsteps up in the top floor. They were very, very light. So I would say that they were female, but distinctly heard these footsteps. And my meter died again.
Were you hearing a foot contact the ground or the floor, or were you hearing like a creak every so often?
It wasn't a creak. It was more like the padding of feet on a floor. There was no creaking, so it wasn't like an actual weight thing, you know? So that in my brain, I'm like, okay, well, I know nobody's up there, but this is more just more me knowing that nobody's up there. Because if I think that if it was
like a residual
like a solid
sound,
human, yeah, it was a residual sound. If it was a solid human up there, there would have been that like creak, but it was more just like the padding of feet on the floor. And it was
I
very,
asked
very
that,
soft. Yeah.
the reason I asked that is having grown up in a house that had hardwood floors. There was one part in our hallway that when weather was changing, you know, whether it was going from cold to warm or damp to dry, there was a series of boards in that hallway that would creak on their own. And it was completely because of the weathering of the wood, you know, swelling up or changing shape, shrinking down. So that creaking for me, even though it's creepy when it's happening, isn't always necessarily an indicator. But when you're hearing the padding of something taking steps, that's a pretty good indicator.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, like, because I live in a northern climate where it's really cold. We have, like, there's a few boards in our house that completely shift. It's weird, but that's not, it wasn't the creak. It was that padding of feet. It was the weirdest thing. I loved it, though. And then, like I said, my meter died again. Which, hey, maybe something was pulling energy from it. I don't know, but it was super, super spooky.
That's a strange component to doing these kind of investigations. You know, having batteries drain. You know, I mean, it's easy to jump to. You know, I've bought batteries off the counter that
suck.
Yeah, that suck. That have probably been sitting up there for 3 years and they didn't last for shit.
Right.
But when you start having repeated things happen like that, especially in the same night, that's strange. There's something to that, you know. And I mean, obviously the majority of investigators believe that they're sucking that power out to try to manifest in some way. I mean, I guess it makes sense, but you know, obviously none of us know. But it would be really interesting to know what is that component. Why does that happen?
Oh, batteries sometimes don't work properly in cold temperatures, do they? They last a third of the time in cold temperatures, and it's always been known for hauntings. You get the cold spots and things like that. So whether that has some sort of contributing effect to the draining of the batteries is something definitely to look into. But,
Sean, have you ever done any kind of investigations?
I haven't actually, no. Me and Amanda have talked about this. It's weird because Lancaster's one of the most, or it has some of the most haunted places in the UK in such a small city. But no, I've never actually done one. I do want to go on one. Definitely want to go on one pretty soon, but no, But I know I was going to mention this before. The castle is no longer a prison, and it's open to the public now. And they've done some fantastic work inside. They've made it into a full tourist attraction, and I believe they are starting to do proper ghost tours and ghost hunts now. So yeah, definitely would like to go on one. I've watched the documentaries.
I don't have a big bucket list, but on that list is, before I die, I would like to get over to the UK, and I would would love to visit some of the old castles, because I've always had an affinity for that. And I don't know why, because the lifespan wasn't that great. And
I've always said to people I talk to, if you're going to come to the UK, of course, check out the castles and the attractions in London. But if you want authentic, long-lasting history, come up north. We have a lot more varied history.
Yeah.
We have a lot more Viking history up north. Heysham, where I live now, was almost certainly founded by the Vikings, over 1,000 or 2,000 years ago. So up north, I would say we have probably more authentic castles than you do down south. Untouched castles up north. So.
I remember speaking with, it might have been Tommy Cullum from Let's Get Freaky podcast over there where you're at, Sean. It might have been him, or it might have been one of my guests, gentleman who used to work at the Cauliflower, which was some kind of nightclub type old building, but it was a nightclub, and I think he was in charge of securing musical talent for it. He had a bunch of experiences there, but all that to say, it's amazing to me that your history over there, you still have remnants and substantial structures that are still standing, that you can go back and you can look, that came, like you said, built in the 900s.
Yeah.
And even further back. Here in America, our history here is a couple hundred years, and that's it. There's nothing that we can go, we can go to, the Grand Canyon or something like that, and we can see
natural
things that have been around forever.
Yeah.
But it's not the same as going and being able to see history.
I can step out of my front door now, and 5 minutes down the road I can be at St. Patrick's Chapel, which it's ruined, but they still have, one gable end is still standing. I've shown you videos, Amanda, haven't I, of St. Patrick, and that was built in the 7th century. So that's, and funnily enough, they still have the stone graves there. And I don't know if you know the Greatest Hits Black Sabbath album, and it has some stone graves at the front.
Yeah.
Well, that's Heysham. That's where I live.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that's, some of that is 7th century. It's 1,300 years old, and it's still standing.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Well, I am very fortunate where I live, and I think, again, me and Amanda have discussed this. I take it for granted because I see it every day. Mm-hmm. But for people from North America and Canada, most probably appreciate it more than I do. But I am certainly taking more notice of my surroundings and my history now. But that's because I've lived with it all my life, and it is very interesting.
I'd love to see it. I love the old architecture. I know when I was in Mexico one time, I went to Chichen Itza and the ruins at Tulum. Oh my gosh. I don't know what it is about these places. It's just so amazing. And I think maybe it's because I'm in North America, where I think the oldest building I've been in here is like from the 1800s. If you go out east, it's a little different. But in Western Canada, there's nothing. There's nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a strange perspective to think about the the still visible history that goes back that far over there in the UK, and here there literally would have been nothing for the majority of that time, other than maybe teepees and stuff from the Native Americans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It amazes me how it's still standing.
I was just asking, what's the oldest building in the States? Isn't it from the 1600s, or is there anything from the 1500s? No, there wouldn't be.
I couldn't tell you. I have no idea.
Yeah, I think it's the 1600s.
But, I would fly across.
Crazy.
I would fly across the ocean to go see stuff that was centuries and centuries and centuries old. But I wouldn't get in a car to drive to find something that was built in the 1600s. That's like, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. It's just the 1600s.
But I've always had an affinity.
Not old enough.
An affinity for that time. I think,
yeah.
There for a long time, if I would have had my choice of when to exist, it would have been back in the days of castles and knights and all that. But I'd probably be dust and nothing more had I lived back then. I don't think many people reach the age that I'm at now.
Yeah, no, definitely not there.
Another thing to note as well, I forgot to mention this before, is Lancaster Castle. This might be where you know it from. It was where the Pendle witches were imprisoned.
Oh.
So that
would probably be it.
Yeah, so that's another high point of Lancaster Castle's history. So yes, Pendle
are you well versed in the Pendle witches?
So I know of them. I mean, they were imprisoned and hanged in Lancaster, but they weren't from Lancaster. So if you go actually to the Pendle Hill, there are monuments and statues for the witches with the names and history regarding. But the only thing we see here in Lancaster is that they were hanged and where they were hanged and stuff. But like I said, because it's now a tourist attraction, they do have exhibits within the castle for it. So the education is getting there now. But, yeah. And I've been in the original dungeon as well, which I might say is terrifying.
Really?
Absolutely terrifying in there. It is,
and why is that? I mean, what is it about it that's terrifying?
It is what you imagine a dungeon should be like. It is dark, dingy, cold, wet. And the most striking thing I noticed when I went in there was still the scratch marks within the stone. I'm not entirely sure how long they were kept in the dungeon. The shackles are still on the floor, or the shackle ring.
Are they
the original? Really? Yeah, the original iron shackle ring is still in the middle of the dungeon. But yeah, that place is terrifying, and it's heavy.
Are you talking scratches on the wall, like from fingers?
Yep, scratches, nail marks on the wall. Yeah, quite a lot of the dungeon itself was dug out of the bedrock. So, but there were stones placed in there to maybe change the shape of what they dug out, and it's on the softer rock. You can see some of the scratch marks, and yeah, it's horrendous, horrible down there. And it really does make you think. These innocent, because they were innocent at the time, women spent some time down there, and what must they have been thinking? It's horrible.
I do have to say, we have here in the States, we have it's kind of like a dinner theater. I can't remember the name of it right now, but you go in there and it's basically like a jousting arena. And the food that they have there are giant turkey legs or ribs or stuff like that you eat with your hands. And they put on a great show. Prior to going in there, though, they have a couple of exhibitions that you can go through. And I was mortified once we got in there because I really didn't know what it was. My kids were way too young to go in there. But it was basically a room where they had a number of different torture devices that were developed over there in your your part of the world for dealing with people. And
we certainly had an imagination when it came to
my
torture.
Lord, you guys over there were tweaked because that was some shit, dude. And my kids were like, "What's this? What's this do? What's this do?" It's like, never mind, just keep moving.
Yeah. You know that famous heavy metal band, Iron Maiden?
Yeah. That was one of them, actually. To be honest with you, that was one. But there were some other things that would be used on. Geez, I don't even. It was for women, and it was
so bad.
Wow. Holy crap. What could you ever do to deserve that?
Well, at that time they were just being women, right? That's what they did. They were women that were a little bit odd, right?
Yeah. I mean, the depravity of the mind that came up with those things.
Yeah. You know what's I always find crazy is I don't know what it was called, but it was like they'd put a cage. Oh, I just lost him. They'd put a cage on your stomach, and they'd put rats in the cage,
and then they'd cut you so that the rats would lick the blood,
and then they'd put like heat on the other side of it, so they'd try to get away from the heat, and they'd dig into your stomach.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember what that one was called. Horrible.
Yeah. I mean, there were some bad ones for men too, but it seemed like the really nasty torture things that they had for the women centered on a couple of very specific body parts.
Yes. Yes, they did. Yeah, and I don't know why they would have, I don't know, whatever. They, like you said, they were tweaked.
Yeah, definitely tweaked.
Yeah.
You don't ever hear any shit like that coming out of Canada.
Oh, I don't know. Canada's pretty bad. There's some pretty crazy people up here.
Yeah, we got Sean back.
There he is. I was just talking about that device, Sean, where it's like a cage you put on somebody's stomach and then they would cut you and have rats in it and then they'd heat up outside so the rats would like burrow into your stomach.
To escape from it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's bad.
Lovely.
Yeah, we were just taking the opportunity to talk smack about how crazy your people's ideas of torture were.
I fully accept that. I think we were mentally crazy at one point.
Yeah.
But you can't say we don't have an imagination, you know.
You do actually have an.
We could have just used it for something more positive.
Yeah.
Any other experiences? Any other experiences worth talking about?
Yeah, what do you got, Sean? You have another one.
Yeah, there's a little one. So when I was around about 11 years old, my mother's partner was a farmer. And the farm was in Temple Sowerby, which is in Cumbria, which is maybe 60 miles north from me. So they lived in an old farmhouse, and these farmhouses back in the day had something like 10 or 12 rooms because it was to hold the whole family. And this farmhouse was maybe 150 years old. At the time, only, I would say, a quarter of the house was actually occupied. The rest of it didn't need to be used. There was no central heating, no radiator, so it was all heated by a coal fire. So they used as little rooms as possible. So I used to go and stay there in the holidays, and I mean the bedroom I stayed in was absolutely massive. It was probably the size of my floor plan in my house now, so it was huge. But every night you could hear stuff in the attic, and it was a big, open, usable attic at the time. So maybe after a couple of days, I'd tell my mum, we'd go up, we'd check it, we'd check for pigeons, rats, mice, and we couldn't find anything. The roof was intact, so there was no birds getting in. There was no drop-ins, and there was points where you could actually see underneath the floorboards, so you could look down each of the eaves of the floor. We couldn't see anything, so okay, forget about it. The next night would come, you could hear it again, scratching, footsteps. We did hear creaks, and like you said before, maybe we can attribute that to the change in humidity or temperature, etc. But yeah, it was just really strange, because we would try and debunk it. We'd try and say, right, well, there must be a rat up there must be mice, or a cat's got up there, or a pigeon has somehow flown in, and absolutely nothing. No bird droppings, no rat droppings, no uneaten food. We just, we couldn't really explain it. But within the other parts of the house that weren't used, it was almost like it had just been abandoned. So there was kind of like living rooms behind walls that still had a TV and a sofa and ornaments and stuff from my mum's partner's parents. But, they were just not, and it's just accumulating dust everywhere and things like that. But
I've got lights flickering in here.
Hey.
Oh no.
Maybe I'm transferring that energy to you.
Yeah.
Maybe. Go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I never actually saw anything, no apparitions, but it was just heavy. It was just really heavy atmosphere in the parts of the house that weren't used. And it was just, I mean, I was 11 years old, so my imagination was running wild. And, but then I'd tell my mum about it, and my mum would go around, who was an adult, so she was more, logical than I was at the time. And even my mum said it was just a heavy atmosphere.
You say that, and by saying that, you kind of discount because of your age. And I argue that even though at those ages we don't have the context, and we don't have the ability to put into words, but I argue that when we are young, that we are considerably more open to those things.
Yeah. I've heard you're more, not susceptible, but yeah, you're more. I'm trying to think of the word. You haven't been taught the responsibilities of life, so you're more open, and you don't have the same sort of oppression as you do as an adult, right, in essence, really. So yeah, I've heard that feeling. Well, we have, aren't we? We've all got credit. I think we've all got credit cards and everything. So.
That's a legitimate thing, the oppression that comes from the responsibilities of being an adult and having to have a job and having to pay your bills and all the things that I think subsequently kind of dumb down our senses.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
you know what I find weird?
What?
I find it weird that there was, I think the creepiest part of this story, Sean, is that all these rooms were just like closed off and blocked out. And
I once
weird.
Yeah, I once asked why is everything still in place? And Mike, my mum's partner at the time, said the last time it was used was 1989. So
what happened in 1989?
Yeah, I believe he.
That's
might
where
have
my
been
brain goes.
He may have taken the farm over, and his parents had moved out, but. It was very strange. It was very strange that the door had just been shut behind him and nothing had ever been moved. It was weird. It was very weird, but yeah, huge house. Huh. It was absolutely huge. So,
curious with Sean, like over in the UK, with the amount of history that is still around that you can visit and all that. What is the perspective from the vast part of your population there on paranormal stuff? You know, are they as UFO crazy and ghost hunting crazy as we are here in the States? Or
I think that I'm not speaking on behalf of all Brits, but I think we're definitely more into ghosts and hauntings than we are with the UFOs. Mainly because we probably don't see or have as many reported sightings of UFOs. You know, we've got the Rendlesham,
right?
That's our Roswell. You know, we'll have the odd sighting and stuff, but with hauntings, you could handpick 5 or 10 different locations in any given city in the UK that have had a haunting or have some sort of haunted story or ghost story associated with it. So it's a lot more prevalent over here with hauntings. So, but I think that is probably, like you say, it's down to our history. It's, you know, I should imagine you'll probably find that in other European countries as well, because we're all kind of similar age. So we all have that long history and tormented history as well, you know, invasions, battles, torture. But we won't talk about the torture, you know.
So, a lot of there. I think it's safe to say that there is an inordinate amount of death in both of our. I don't know so much about Canada, but in our histories, there's been a lot of bloodshed and a lot of lives lost to get where we are.
Unfortunately, the Brits have been involved in both.
Yeah, it's all your guys' fault.
It's all our fault.
Yeah, Canada's got quite a bit, though.
Have they?
Yeah. Like, we've got a lot of displacement of the Indigenous peoples. There's all the residential schools. There's a lot of serial killers that come out of Canada. There's a lot of crazy people here. Yeah. I think it's because we have such long winters.
They get bored looking for something to do.
People get a little cuckoo after 6 months of winter. Yeah.
What about up in Canada? What seemed to be the primary focus of people's interest when it comes to the high strangeness in Canada? I would guess Bigfoot, Sasquatch.
Yeah.
And you guys have got quite a bit of UFO stuff.
Yeah, lots of UFO, Bigfoot. But yeah, we called it Sasquatch, Wendigo, and we have lots of sea serpents, actually, or like lake serpents. There's some in Ontario. There's some up north. There is the Ogopogo that lives in Lake Okanagan in British Columbia. And then there's lots of sea serpents that are seen off the coast of British Columbia in between the island, like Vancouver Island and the mainland. And then we have the Nahanni Valley up in Northwest Territories that is cursed, allegedly.
Really?
Have you heard of the Nahanni Valley? I'm sure you have.
The name sounds familiar.
They call it, another name for it is the Valley of the Headless Men.
That I have not heard.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, there was a lot of prospectors that went in and never came out, and they would find their bodies sans head. There's stories of entire tribes of indigenous peoples that just vanished, but then were spirits. They have they've got cryptids up there too. The Wahila is one. It's almost like a direwolf kind of deal. Yeah, there's some pretty crazy stuff. It's definitely something to dig into. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So yeah, that's what we've got.
Yeah.
I always say too, like, we have ghosts. Like, I'd say if you went out east, there's a lot more hauntings and stuff, but because we don't have the structures, it's like that energy isn't held the same way as you would find in Europe. So I think that's why we don't have as much. Not saying that there isn't like the ingredients for it. It's just there's nowhere to hold it. I think that's my opinion on it. That's my theory as to why we don't have as much.
I follow a guy. I believe he's moved recently, and I believe he's in Edmonton, Alberta now. He has a YouTube channel that's been around for a good while, Mountain Beast Mysteries, and forever, his channel has been him going out. The guy's got balls the size of King Kong, because he goes out and searches for Bigfoot alone, and videotapes and stuff all on his own. But having recently moved to the city, he has like gone headlong into the topic of UFOs, because he is getting like an inordinate amount of videos of these things in the skies above Edmonton.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the city that I live in. There's a lot. We have such open, because we're prairies, we just have such open skies. Like, you can see so much. And I think too, energy related, because we also have the northern lights really strong here. So I don't know if that has anything to do with anything. I don't know, but there is a lot of UFO sightings.
Interesting. Well, I'll tell you what, why don't you guys wrap this up with letting all my listeners know where they can find you, where they can find you on socials, what you got coming up, anything exciting that's in the works.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so yeah, you can find us wherever it is that you listen. We are over on Instagram at Haunted Strange Pod. We have a lot of great stuff coming down the pipe. We've got some cryptids. We've got hauntings. We've got really good high strangeness coming up. I'm trying to think, and I can't think of anything in particular that we have talked about recently, although we just recorded yesterday. We are going to...
We've got the Dyatlov coming up.
Yes, actually, this coming Tuesday, Dyatlov Pass.
And
we dig into that.
And your absolute favourite, the Flatwoods Monster, coming up, episode 22.
Oh yeah, that one is coming now too. Yeah.
Thanks, Sean. If you do want to check out Valley of the Headless Man, that's episode 5. So if you want to go back and listen, we do have the Harney Valley, episode 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the name of the show again is?
The Haunted and the Strange.
With Amanda and Sean. It's been a pleasure talking with you guys.
Thank you.
It's been fun doing this over international waters and international timelines, I guess you could say.
A worldwide tour now. Worldwide.
Been a pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Bye.
Bye.